Welcome to Binge Movies, the podcast that ranks and reviews the best and sometimes the worst movies of all time. But today, I'm stepping off the beaten path. Oh, that son of a bitch is well worn. We are going to be bidding farewell to 2024. And I wanted to shine a light on films that don't fall neatly into either the best or worst buckets. So if you're looking for those, you can catch me hashing out the highs with the countdown or slogging through the lows of 2024 with We Watched a Thing. Right here, right now, I'm blathering about the movies that lit a spark. Whether they burned bright or fizzled out like a damn firecracker, it doesn't much matter. This is the Sum of 2024 episode. It's not about winners or losers. This is a love letter to the middle ground, where brilliant ideas trip over their own feet, stand-up performances elevate lackluster stories, and some flicks just make you go, you know what? That wasn't half bad. These are the flawed gems and lingering oddities of the year, the kind that get under your skin for reasons you can't quite put your finger on. But don't worry, dear listener. I intend to put my finger gently but firmly right on it, whatever that is. I'm going to rotate my finger in a counterclockwise direction. I'll be including contributions from two of my generous elite patrons, because let's face it, some of the sharpest takes come straight from those guys. And stick around for a rapid-fire bonus round where I'll share feedback from my delightfully deranged weirdos who choose to listen to this show. Now let's kick things off with our very first segment. A look at those movies with ideas so compelling they made us wish the execution had been just as good.
This is your home away from home. We share everything up here.
Here we're one.
Whoa.
We gotta get up now, guys.
War has broken out below, and we were told to take the ISS by any means necessary.
The Russians got the same orders as us.
We're evolved species.
Rated R, only in theaters January 19th.
Yeah, the first one up for me that was a movie that, like, ironically, towards the end of last year, it did, I think, man, was that last year already? Was that 2023? I think we did a Peter Hyams episode, or maybe we recorded it at the beginning of the year, myself and Joe from Real Spoilers, and we talked about his Peter Hyams movie 2010. And we talked about on the episode, I cut it way down, but we had this extended piece of conversation, as Joe and I are wont to do, about not the 2001, not the Space Odyssey aspects of 2010, but the idea of two nations who are in essentially a Cold War, who are in a cooperative peacekeeping co-mission, and then World War III breaks out. Goes from a Cold War to a hot war on Earth. And you're somewhere either, in deep space, or in this case, you are hovering over the planet. Like, you can look down and see the nukes go off. And you have limited communication as far as what happened, who's at fault, but you're getting these orders that you don't even know that you can trust from what you believe to be your side, right? And so you're Russian scientist and you're being told, we're now at war, take the space station. And you're American scientist and you're being told, we're now at war, Russia's the enemy, take the space station. I think especially given the particular climate, the time that we're living in, the fact that Americans are very slowly coming to terms with the fact that the Cold War never ended. It's just we quit, we took our eyes off the ball, and allowed ourselves to be profoundly compromised. I think like this was a kind of a perfect genre movie premise, kind of a perfect, it really could be an A movie, but it's definitely a very solid B movie premise. And the final execution for ISS isn't really awful. It's not a bad movie. That's why it's on this list, but it's not a good movie either. It doesn't deliver what I was hoping for. Once we get past the kind of initial conceit, and once it just kind of devolves into a very lackluster paranoid thriller, which is what the movie should be. The movie should be a paranoid thriller. I don't know that it needed to necessarily be like Crimson Tide. Like that's an example of how I think to do that fairly well. But I don't know. It just didn't really work for me at all. Beyond the premise, it just sort of fell apart as the movie goes along. It's got decent enough performances, actually some pretty good direction. I would really like to see more from the crew that worked on this, writers, directors, so forth and so on. There's some kind of promise here that is really exciting, and I'd like to see maybe a few years down the road a concept like this get done again, because I think there's some gold here. Another one for me is the return of M. Night Shyamalan. It's Trap. Here's my caveat to this premise. The premise of we are tracking a serial killer, and because we found a stub for a ticket to a Dua Lipa kind of adjacent sort of figure, Sabrina Carpenter, Chaperone kind of figure, pop star figure. We know he's going to be at this concert. That is not the good part of that premise. That's not the good part of that premise. There's like a two-parter here of part A of the premise is good and part B of the premise is good, but smashed together, it doesn't really make any sense. Part A of the premise is a serial killer is a loving, doting father who is on an excursion, on a daddy date, which I don't like that phrase because it's weird, but he's having a dad day with his daughter and is being hunted for being a serial killer, right? Like the FBI and the police believe that they have a general idea of where this guy is for some reason, and they are trying to contain him. And they think it would be easier to take him in public, or that kind of a thing. And they don't know exactly who he is, but they have an idea of where he is, again, for some odd reason. And the dad is trying to keep like a normal day going with his teen daughter, and while the world is closing in on him. That's an interesting premise. The idea of a serial killer let loose at a Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert is also an interesting premise. I don't believe that the FBI would be like, let's use the tour event as a trap. Like that's where it gets dumb. When you try to smash those two things together, it gets really stupid. And because it begins to, what works about the movie is how do we put this guy who is seemingly normal, but is revealed to be a serial killer into situations he has to get himself out of, right? I also think like the movie, there's a little bit of disservice here with the film because the movie would be much more effective if we didn't know that the main character was the serial killer. I don't know how you execute on that. But the moment I know that our main guy is the killer, which is, you very obviously know it. You know it from the trailers. There's no tension in the movie, really at all, because it's like, okay, he's the main character. Am I rooting for him? Because he's like brutally murdering and killing people. So am I rooting for the killer? Why? Like it just, I don't know. Put it all together, it's kind of like a bad episode of Dexter, which in my opinion are all episodes of Dexter. Don't care for it. But yeah, I've racked my brain of like, how do I there's something tantalizing here. How do you make it work? And if you have an idea of how you think you can make the whole thing work, let me know, because I think there is something there. I just can't figure out how to crack it. The other problem you have, this is the big problem that Shyamalan has with all of his movies. How do you market it? Right? Let's say the big twist of the movie is we don't know that Josh Hartnett is the serial killer. We don't know who the serial killer is. And maybe that's the way you'd have to do it. Maybe the way you'd have to do it is it would have to be more like a whodunit, where you'd have to have an ensemble cast of characters who are all at a concert. And all the FBI knows, again, for some odd reason, is that somewhere in that arena, there's a killer. and we have to capture them. And we think they'll go more easily, they're not a mass murderer in that sense. We'll think they'll go more easily in public or whatever. Again, that strains credulity a little bit, but I can see that kind of working. So maybe that's it. Maybe the key would have to be almost like an identity, where it'd have to be an ensemble where we get, a bunch of Josh Hartnett types. You're like, okay, which one of these is the killer? And you'd have to have red herrings, and you'd have to have clues that would point to one person more than the other, and then, oh no, that's not that person, and and then the twist would be, and you'd have to successfully convince the audience that Josh Hartnett's loving father was a guy caught between the FBI and whoever the true killer was, if that makes any sense. Like, the twist would have to be that we think he is the protagonist, who catches on to something being very wrong, and as a protective father, he doesn't want the moment being ruined for his daughter, and or something. Again, like, I feel like there's a way to rework this premise that makes it work. So I'm really interested in your ideas. How would you fix Trap? Maybe you think it doesn't need to be fixed. I think it needs to be fixed. Another movie that's like one of those that, like, God damn, there's a way to do this, and this isn't the way to do it, is, I think the way you pronounce it, because it's been a while since I've watched this, Kato Lake, which ended up being a straight-to-streamer for HBO Max. And it's a very, very interesting kind of, it feels very much like a sci-fi novel, and it may be based on a novel. Again, it's been a few months since I've watched it, and I don't remember. It feels like a novel. It feels like one of those moderate New York Times bestseller novels, something that's like just in the top 10, that hangs around for a bunch of years, and it's the writer's fourth best book, but it's still pretty solid, and it gets adapted into a movie. This stars, I think, mostly, if not all, unknowns. It's coming from people who I don't know, director who I don't know, writers who I don't know, if I remember correctly. And yet it looks pretty good. And it's this very interesting, I don't want to give too much away about it, but it is a kind of, it's not quite Annihilation, but it's kind of a time warp movie. It very much reminds me of, oh my God, Predestination, I think is the movie. Is that the Ethan Hawke one? I think Predestination's a better movie than this, but it's one of those like mind fuck movies where there's all kind of shit going on for the first half of the film, and we don't really understand what it is. We think we have an idea, or we think we're getting glimpses, but we don't really know. And then the second half of the movie is about really cluing in the characters and the rest, the audience, into what you were really watching the first time through. And I think a lot of the motivations, the characters, what happens, when it happens, why it happens, I think is really very interesting. And I think that the movie is really only about one point. It's about making one particular point. And movies that are like that can be either extremely successful, so that the last scene of the movie feels like the confusion clears and the emotionally salient point comes through, and you as the audience member go, oh, fuck. And then it kind of breaks you. And when that happens, those movies they kind of transcend their, like, the illogicalness of them, right? Because inherently a lot of these movies just don't make any sense when you really stretch it out. The big problem with this movie, and there's another movie, I think maybe it's called like In Another Time, or it's about like a brother-sister heist who end up going to a farmhouse, and that's another one that could be on this list of like pretty good premise, bad movie, or a movie that doesn't completely work. By the time this movie gets to its emotional punch, which is the last scene of the movie, it's only moderately successful. And a lot of it is because the in-between stuff is really kind of boring. It's shot pretty good. It's an interesting location. It's a place in the country we don't typically see. There's some money that's been put behind this, because there's some things that they do. They go, again, it's like one of those movies you go, how did this get made? How did these people get this much money? Where was it acquired from? why did Warner Brothers pick it up and then just stick it on a streaming service? And then you watch it and you go, oh, I see. Like, it's just not an entirely successful movie. Not bad, not entirely successful. The other one I would put in that category, and this is going to split people. Not as much as my final one, but this one's really going to split people. And that is In a Violent Nature. I know people who love this movie. I know people who hated this movie. I'm in between. I love the idea, and mostly because this was an idea that I had. I can let the cat out of the bag now because this movie already exists, so it doesn't matter. My idea for the new Friday the 13th, which I was like, I've been mulling around in my head for, let's say, 10 years. And I wrote some ideas down. I never even did a treatment for it or anything. I just had these ideas in my head. Was that the movie should be from Jason's perspective. Not a POV movie necessarily, but I really wanted to play around with the idea of that they borrow from Halloween, which is borrowed from Giallo, which is the POV of the killer. But not that I want to do like over-the-shoulder first-person shooter kind of vibe, but kind of. But like, can we do this in a way that avoids it feeling video gamey? And that was my holdback, because I wanted to be with Jason more often than not. Right? It wasn't going to be kind of this tricked up, almost fake pseudo one shot that this movie kind of gets into sometimes. But introduce our characters, and what if you could tell a story about your characters incidentally, right? Because the let's be honest, the crew at the camp, whether they're counselors who are arriving early to get the camp ready, despite the fact that it's very obviously fall in the background, but it's supposed to be the start of summer. Like whether it's that or whether it's a bunch of people trespassing on a defunct camp because, you know, whatever bizarro timeline continuity these movies have, a bunch of people got slaughtered there, so a bunch of horny teens go to stay at the camp. Whatever the fuck the premise is, it gets the meat, the dead meat, into the territory that Jason needs them to be in so he can hatchet them to death with a machete. Those people don't matter. Those people are not real characters more often than not. The exception of like part 2, part 4, part 6. They're not people. They're not human beings. They're literally just cannon fodder. So there's not that much to learn about them. So what if you took all of those cliches, all that same old shit that feels true to a Friday the 13th film, but you were seeing it from a new novel perspective? And that's kind of what this movie is, but not really. Because to me, the movie, it wants to be a Friday the 13th film. But it doesn't, I think, how do I put this? It's almost too original, because there ends up being these characters who do not belong in a Friday the 13th film, who, I don't know, who are still underdeveloped, but are underdeveloped in a way that is different than the way that they're underdeveloped in a Friday the 13th film. But we spend kind of way too much time with them, and they're not all that interesting. And the killer himself is interesting. The deaths themselves are interesting. The pace of the movie didn't really bother me as much as, but then when I get to my characters, I don't really care about them. So to me, I loved it as a novel experiment, and maybe it was a proof that my idea was stupid and it wouldn't completely work, or it was a bad idea. I don't know. But I like the bones of this movie, no pun intended. I like the ideas of it. I like the execution of it in certain places, but overall, it was not a satisfying watch. It was like, okay, I've seen that. It's fine. It's okay. This is maybe my most controversial pick for premise, because most people think this premise is terrible, and so did I until I thought about it, and that is Joker Folie à Deux. Now, you're going to argue the movie's actually just plain bad, and I can't even necessarily agree with you, but I don't think the premise is bad. If you said, okay, Joker 2019 is this weird standalone Elseworld riff on 70s sleazoid movies with a heavy coat of Scorsese on top, I get you. I get you if you don't like it. I get you if you do like it. I get you if you're in the middle with it. I'm in the middle with it. I'm not as offended by it as other people are that it exists for whatever reason. It didn't need a sequel, though. It's very clearly a standalone movie. They backed up the Brinks truck because that movie made $1 billion. So they gave these fuckers $300 million, you know, I don't know, 280, 290, whatever it was, and said, do it again. And just the premise of Joker is, you know, somewhere in Gotham's penal system, Arkham, but not quite Arkham, you know, prison mental health facility, and is being broken down. And while he's there, he meets Harley Quinn, and Harley Quinn's going to be Lady Gaga, and the movie's going to have psychotic, almost natural born killer fantasy elements to it, but they're going to be musically. They're going to be musicals, and it's about Harley trying to rebuild or escape with the Joker. That's not a bad idea. It's a strange idea, but it's not a bad idea. The problem with the execution of this movie is that it's really fucking boring. And even if the musical numbers, if that's what you want to call them, aren't bad, because they just begin and end in his head very clearly. Like, the movie's never like fucking around with you and like, oh no, this is like some magical reality. No, it's very clearly always in his head. They feel like a giant waste of time. Because it's not even about the fact that they're in his head, right? The movie isn't about this mad romance, this foolish romance between these two fools. That's not what it's about. That would be an interesting movie. It'd be a very interesting movie if it was about two people who matched each other's crazy, right? But it's more cynical than that. It's about a woman who's crazy, but is pretending to match his crazy. And then when she really gets to know him, it just turns out, well, he's a really sad guy. But we already knew that. That's not a revelation to us if you watch the first movie. He was a really sad guy who society pushed, okay, in the argument of the film, to the point of becoming dangerous. He was sad and pathetic. Then he became dangerous because the world didn't give a fuck about him. But for this movie, it's like, remember, before he was dangerous, he was sad and pathetic. We already knew that. So there's nowhere for it to go, for it to go, except for it to go backwards. And that's the problem with the whole movie. It's just an undoing. It's just a ass backwards film. And then that makes it very, very boring. All right, let's get to some patron feedback for premise. Jason, who's an elite patron, cited the premise for a movie called House of Spoils, which I've never even heard of. It's a Blumhouse movie, it looks like, and here's what he said. He says it's never able to figure out what it wants to be, whether it's about the psyche of a female chef in a male-dominated profession, or if it wants to lean into the horror aspects it presents. Blumhouse strikes again. Dan is a movie that I watched with Old Man Brad over at Tubi Tuesday and Old Man Brad. We watched a pre-release, a screener of this thing called Destroy All Neighbors, which I think went straight to Shudder in the United States. And Dan says, yeah, keep making weird stuff. Ultimately, though, the lead was so unlikable by the time the climax happened, I didn't care so much anymore. I agree. I actually would put Destroy All Neighbors into the bad category. I liked about 25 minutes of the 90-minute movie, and everything else I found to be insufferable about it. So let's shift our focus from premise to performances. These are performances that managed to stand out even when the rest of the movie couldn't keep up.
I'm sick to my stomach. I'm out of my mind. You might know the problem. The problem is mine.
The top performance for me this year in a movie that didn't work like as much as I wanted it to, and I like this one more than I liked the first one, was Naomi Scott in Smile 2. What was demanded of her, the physical performance aspect. And you'll find like a commonality here for me, which is these are all horror adjacent performances, and they're majority female, because I think the horror genre gives women a unique opportunity, in genre movies in particular, but horror especially, because we're not doing a lot of sci-fi. We're not even doing a lot of like true blue sort of grindhouse action movies anymore. Genre has basically just been narrowed down to horror movies because they have a pretty decent chance of ROI. And so it gives women an opportunity to shine in ways that a lot of mainstream movies, superhero films, even like dramas don't always. It's Naomi Scott in Smile 2. I thought Naomi Scott was incredible. I think she's the best part of that movie. I think that the direction is heads and tails better than the first film, so much so that when I got out of the second film, I was like, well, who directed this one? And I was like, oh shit, it's the exact same people, same writers, same directors, a little bit more money, not a ton more money. And I think just overall, like a much better movie. Still not a great movie. I wouldn't put it on my best of list. Definitely isn't on my worst of list. That's why it's on the sum of. But what really elevates the movie, in my opinion, other than some of the choreo and some of the scene setups, like there's some really, if you just watch it as like a series of kind of spooky, weird psychological set pieces, it kind of works better than a hung together film. The main thing that I really, really appreciated the movie was Naomi Scott, who, when you have to play kind of somebody going crazy and somebody being hysterical and someone who is an asshole, it's very easy to be one note unlikable, one note grating on the nerves, just somebody that you can't sympathize with, you don't want to be around, and that makes those movies very hard to enjoy. I thought she walked a perfect line between being a very accurate, entitled pop star, Gen Z asshole to also being somebody who is coming undone, and also someone who you can be sympathetic towards, somebody who you see there probably is some remnant of a good person in there somewhere, just enough for us to sympathize with. And that's what movies like that need. Otherwise, you just hate the character and can't wait for them to die, or then you're bummed if they happen to survive, which, spoilers and the Smile franchise, I don't think anybody really survived. So also, I want to give a special shout out to the opening scene, which has Kyle Gallner in it. That's the best part of that movie. That first maybe 5-10 minutes is excellent. I wish the whole movie was that good, but yeah, Smile too. Naomi Scott, great performance. Speaking of another female performance in a horror movie, this one to me is so close to being a good movie. It's not I would even maybe make the argument it's a good movie. So this is not one of the best of the year. Let's start from that premise. It's Nell Tiger Free, for The First Omen. A movie called The First Omen has no business being as good as it is. It has no business being as graphic as it is because it's coming from a major studio. It has no business being as scary as it is. The physicality of her performance, especially in the third act, is some of the best on-screen stuff I have seen this year, period. It is, is it shades of Possession? Is it shades of this, that, whatever? Sure, yeah, whatever they're saying on Twitter and TikTok and Blue Sky, all that on YouTube, all the video essayists, that's all right, but it doesn't matter. It's still good because that's not easy to do. That's like when someone's like, well, trying to compare athletes, and it's like 99% of people can't run, shoot, throw, or hit as fast as a professional athlete. So if two people are similar in their stats, they're still better than everybody else, even if somebody's copying somebody else. Even if somebody's trying to be Kobe, if they get anywhere close to Kobe, they're still better than 99% of people who've ever picked up a basketball. So even if there's performance notes that are copies of other horror performances that women have done in horror, Nell Tiger Free is still in that 99 percentile. She makes that movie really fucking sing and really work. When it has no business being that good. It all comes down to her. I think Arkasha Stevens, directed that movie. She's one to watch, man. Great director. Micah Monroe. Now listen, another horror performance. She's basically the 21st century scream queen. And I don't mean that in any pejorative sense whatsoever. Like, she is the go-to for genre movies. And she's been in some shitty ones, right? She did a lot of good stuff in the 2010s. 2020s has been slightly shakier for her. I didn't know she had this performance in her. I didn't know that she could do this. She's doing something. You can say whatever you want about Longlegs. Is it an entirely derivative film from 3 or 4 other very obvious sources, Silence of the Lambs being the number one? Yes, it is. Is it very just say whatever you want to say about it. It didn't live up to the hype for me. I thought it was fine. It's a middling film, but she is exceptionally good in it because she's doing something we've never seen her do, and it is very believable. It is a very, again, sometimes in genre movies, you're given what could be in the hands of a lesser performer, a one-note character. All three of these women are given something that could just be, well, here's what it is. And they're adding something to it that puts it into the realm of believability that makes these characters feel like human beings, which is the art of performance. Even if the movie isn't great, even if the material isn't great, the performance, the actor is bringing something to it. And I feel like Micah Monroe did in Long Legs. My fourth and final is for a movie that, again, probably is worse than I remember it being when I saw it in theaters. Like, if I went back to rewatch it, I would probably like it less. I think a lot of my positivity towards the film in retrospect was just the opportunity to see this guy on the screen one more time, because at this point, at his age and at my age, it feels like a gift every time that we get to see him do something that has especially some juice and acclaim and marketing and money behind it. That's Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice in Beetlejuice. The movie is a ho-hum movie. I think it's a mashup of 40 years worth of scripts and half-baked ideas that are thrown together. And again, it works because I think Tim Burton was kind of in his bag again, taking whatever juice he's got left and making it work. But it really works because of Michael Keaton. He doesn't overplay Beetlejuice. They mercifully don't do too many redundant things, although the third act gets a little bit of like, we've been here before. But it's such a one-off performance. The idea that 40 some years later he could just flip it back on and get back into it, which he said it took a lot of work on his part. He couldn't just flip it back on, and he was really nervous about it, so he really worked at it because it was such a spontaneous creation in the moment that when he did it, very different from what Burton had originally envisioned. Like, whether you like the Beetlejuice films or you don't, shout out to Paul, who just trashed the original Beetlejuice on Letterboxd. What the fuck, Paul? You got to admit, man, there's something about Keaton where you're watching him create something on screen that did not exist before, has been imitated after, and has not worked, right? So the sheer temerity to try to do it again and to even be able to execute within the realm of what he did the first time is a miracle. So the standout performances for me are Naomi Scott, Smile 2, Noel Tiger Free in The First Omen, Micah Monroe, Long Legs, and Michael Keaton in Beetlejuice. Horror and horror adjacent aplenty. Speaking of aplenty, Dan left us plenty of feedback. He's one of our elite patrons. He shouted out something which I completely forgot about, but he's 100% correct. Jodie Comer in Bike Riders. Bike Riders is an okay film. He even says as much. The film was fine, but I really liked listening to her talk. And when you first hear her talk in the movie, it is so fucking ridiculous. You're like, what the hell is this accent? This is a bad performance. Until you listen to like tape recordings of the actual woman she's playing, and she sounds just like her. Like uncanny, just like her. So you're like, oh shit. And it adds like, is it a Goodfellas kind of wannabe movie? Yeah. But yeah, yeah, it is. Is it as good as Goodfellas? No. Is it as good as Casino? No. Is it in the shadow of those movies? Yes. Are there good performances in it? Yes. And is the best performance in the movie Jodie Comer? Yes. She's excellent in the movie. He has the same thoughts about her for Drive Away Dolls, which I have on my watch list but never got around to and probably never will. He also shouts out Glenn Powell from Hitman. He says he has riz for days, but that film, the love interest script-wise, sucked. Also see, Anyone But You. Anyone But You, was that this year or 2023? I should say, was that 2024 or 2023? Not certain. Jason again is back with Cillian Murphy, who is going to get a shout out again here in our rapid fire round we go through at the end for Small Things Like These, which is a movie I've never even heard of, I don't think. The man can act circles around people without even uttering a single word. It is by no means a feel-good watch, but it's a film that deserved more eyeballs, if nothing else, than for Murphy's performance. While standout performances can sometimes carry a movie, there are films that don't need to hit every high note to still be worth your time. Let's move on to those just okay movies, for one reason or another, that deserve a spot on your watch list.
Place, day one. Rated PG-13. Get tickets now.
I hate A Quiet Place 2. It's one of the worst movies it's one of the great, like, this, we don't need this. This isn't any good. What's his face shoehorning himself into it again. Everything that could go wrong about that movie for me went wrong. I don't like it. I like it so little it is retroactively dinged A Quiet Place for me, which is unfair and it shouldn't be the case, but it is what it is. I don't like it. Period. I don't like the movie. That being said, despite the fact that the second one made me not want to see this movie at all, and I didn't see it in theaters, I didn't do an instant reaction for it, I didn't cover it, I was never going to watch it, but it showed up in my life, and I watched it because there was nothing else to do on a particularly gloomy night. And I was genuinely, like, I think it's a genuinely solid, heartfelt movie. And here's the thing. I think it is a completely different movie than it was marketed as. And I think if you went to the theater expecting a certain type of movie, that's not what you're going to get. You're not going to get this big it was almost marketed as, okay, a big budget, A Quiet Place. We're going to watch the first day and we're going to watch this invasion that takes place in a big city, right? New York, LA, Chicago, wherever, right? Because the first movie was really about the aftermath, and then we get some little flashbacks here and there, but it's really about the aftermath out in the country. And it was, kind of a low budget, mid-budget genre movie. This series of films has been so successful, we're now going to make a big budget movie, arguably with at least like one bigger star with Lupita Nyong'o in it. And therefore it's going to be about, the monsters taking over, New York or wherever. I think that's what you went into expecting, kind of this action-packed horror disaster movie, in the big city. That's not what you got. I mean, you kind of got that. That's really just the backdrop to a character story between, I think it's Joseph Quinn, if I'm not mistaken, Joseph Quinn's character and Lupita Nyong'o. And what you got is this really sad, melancholy story that has almost nothing to do with anything that John Krasinski seemingly would do, even though he's got a story credit on it. And what you end up with is a movie by the guy who made Pig, Michael Sarnowski, which is a movie that defies your expectations. You think Pig is going to be a revenge movie, and it isn't. It's more thoughtful, more tender than that. Excellent movie, by the way. You think that A Quiet Place is going to be a big old disaster set piece movie, and it has some of that in it, but it isn't really. It's a tender movie that's really about forgiveness, and is a movie about letting people in despite the inevitability that letting people in only leads to heartbreak. It's a movie that very much opens up, lets you know from the very beginning that Lupita Nyong'o's character is dying. She's terminally ill. She has days to live. And she has days to live at ostensibly the end of the world. That's it. That's all the movie, and it's about her and this guy who is a broken shell of a man and the connection that they can build with one another. I found it to be very deeply thoughtful. I thought the set pieces, a lot of them were actually very well done. It has all the trappings of a big movie, but they very smartly made it a small movie. And so I think it's worth your watch. I think you should stick it on your watch list. Another one I think is worth your watch, which I'm sure you can find on the same streaming service if you can't make it here to binge movies in sunny tropical Akron, Ohio, is Transformers 1. And this was like a moderate hit, so a lot of people have probably already seen it. And your mileage will vary on this. If you don't have certain taste centers that are that of an 8-year-old boy or girl in 1987, then you probably shouldn't watch this movie. But this is maybe the second best Transformers movie, maybe the best Transformers movie that's ever been made. I could do without some of the on-your-nose humor. I could have done without I'm a little bit sick of the retcon origin story where the hero and the villain that we all know are were really best friends. The bad guy really wasn't a bad guy. And if you really look into it, he really has a point. It's really kind of more of a tragedy. And I don't need it. That's been the go-to for Hollywood basically since Anakin Skywalker. And I don't think it fucking works. That doesn't appeal to me 9 times out of 10. It doesn't appeal to me after the fact. If you're going to create an original villain character and start with the origin and give me a tragic origin that then gives me an understanding of the psychology for an ongoing character in a series of films, that's interesting. If you're going to give me a one-dimensional villain like a Darth Vader or a, oh my God, who's the leader of the Decepticons? My brain. Optimus Prime and Megatron. If you're going to give me Megatron, I don't really actually, he's a really tragic figure. The exception to this is if it's Brian Tyler Henry, because you can give that guy anything and he can make it work. Chris Hemsworth as Optimus Prime, he ends up falling into a little bit of a Peter Cullen impersonation, which is you kind of have to. That's Optimus Prime. I'm sorry. There will never be another one. So you kind of end up having to do what he does. But I don't know. What makes this movie work is it's actually kind of semi-clever. It's not as clever as, say, I think they were trying to go for like a Lego movie kind of vibe with this. Maybe it's even some of the same crew. Definitely going for like a Spider-Verse kind of feel. Maybe even like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Mutant Mayhem movie that came out a year or two ago. It's like trying to be in that same kind of vein of really kind of sharp meta writing. It's not quite as good as some of those movies, but it is a fairly entertaining film. And I would say if you have a young person in your life, they might like it. And if you can get in touch with a younger version of yourself in your life, you may like it as well. Speaking of younger versions of selves, another movie that is, I think, worth your watch, even despite its very many flaws. And I feel like somebody could have come along and elevated this screenplay and taken it to the next level. And that is the film Abigail. A bunch of criminals are sequestered in a house. They have to make it to the morning. They're in a basically like a hideaway, a hideout. And they did a job for ostensibly an oligarch. And they kidnapped this little girl, and they have to wait, until a certain amount of time, and blah, 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 blah. And it turns out the little girl is a literal monster, and that the whole thing was they thought they were kidnapping her, but she was actually kidnapping them. And then chaos ensues from there. That is a great premise for a movie. The execution of the movie is pretty decent. The dialogue is atrocious. This is a movie that loves to drop the F word just for the sake of dropping the F word. And gratuitous fucks don't bother me, but they also get lazy after a certain point. I think with some better direction and a sprucing up of the screenplay, you could really have had, I think, something that would be a lasting genre piece. I'm not sure that Abigail is going to be that, but as a bit of disposable genre fun, that you can probably find in some streaming service somewhere that's already included in your subscription. And it definitely feels like a Tubi movie. This definitely feels like a movie. Again, I don't remember who put this out, so I don't know if it's where the streaming rights will be. But this is one of those movies where I think if it shows up on your Netflix or Amazon Prime or at your local binge movies video store or at Tubi, it's definitely worth a watch. A movie that is straight to streaming, went straight to HBO Max. Documentary, I'm a big documentary guy, although I do think the genre is a little bit oversaturated, is a film that comes from the folks over at The Ringer, who I have a bone to pick with or two for a variety of reasons. If you know, you know. But is Yacht Rock. This is not a great documentary. I wouldn't even say it's a good documentary. I think the personalities and the concept and the music of the subject matter is such a kind of vibe that it's one of those things where you turn on and you just kind of end up feeling better about your day having watched it. I can't explain it. It just is a mood lifter. It's just a fucking mood. And I will also say that any movie that lifts up and honors the GOAT, Michael McDonald, is worth your time. So one of the things I do hate about this movie is it's not a documentary. It's a documentary. Do you get it? I hate that. I got some more feedback from some patrons. Then we're going to go into rapid fire before I close out 2024. Let's start with Jason this time. He recommends for movies The Beekeeper. Yeah, it's dumb as hell, but it's also entertaining for what it is. Beverly Hills Cop. I will second this one. Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. It relies heavy on nostalgia. I disagree there. I felt it relied some on nostalgia, but not necessarily as heavy as I thought it was going to. But it's a worthy addition to the franchise. I agree, full stop to that one. It's like maybe the second best Beverly Hills Cop movie, and it's not even close. Dan recommends Last Stop in Yuma County. I love a chamber piece, and this slow burn dark comedy delivers in an understated way. He also recommends Monkey Man. I feel like it's been forgotten, so I guess it's a good film that deserves a mention. The action is more dynamic than most John Wick films, and sorry, Keanu, Dev Patel acts circles around you. This is not from this year, but if you want a movie that's been forgotten, check out The Green Knight. That came out during we were battling through COVID. Go watch that in 4K. Especially if you like Robert Eggers, like Nosferatu. Go check that one out. Okay, we've explored ideas that sparked our curiosity, performances that stole the spotlight, and movies that were just too intriguing to ignore, flaws and all. But now it's your turn. You didn't give me money, but I'm still going to let you talk. Let's dive into the bonus round and hear what our non-paying listeners had to say about this year's most talked about films. From Clara, not our beloved Claire, but Clara, comes to us from Spain, of all places. She says, Honora, for premise. Honora's raw and honest portrayal of a Manhattan sex worker's life felt powerful, but the film struggled with its pacing as far as I'm concerned. Some scenes linger too long, breaking any momentum. I haven't seen it yet. I had tickets for it 3 times. 2 early passes and 1 right on time. And I no-showed all 3. I'm tired, y'all. For performances, we got Theo. Theo says Zendaya's performance in Challengers was magnetic. She's the reason to watch, but the film itself couldn't match her energy with a story that felt predictable and overly sanitized for a sports drama. I think I kind of know what you're getting at, okay? I think if you're saying overly sanitized, I think maybe not for sports drama, but I think the movie marketed itself as it was going to be a threesome movie, and there's no threesome in the movie. Right? Not in the conventional sense. It's not an explicitly sexual film, despite how it was marketed. As far as films that are worth a watch, Maya says, The Wild Robot is beautifully animated and heartwarming, but the story lacked complexity. It's a great family film, but it didn't offer me much as an adult looking for deeper themes. I can understand. That's another one that I wanted to get to, and I just haven't found the time to be able to get to, but I'm still looking forward to it. Tariq says Conclave. Conclave kept me hooked with its intriguing Vatican setting and strong performances, but the third act relied too much on a shocking twist, losing the taut suspense that made the rest of the film work. Okay, rapid fire here. We got Evan, who's the host over at Spoiler Piece Theater, who does it Blue Sky. Did you know we're on Blue Sky now? Twitter's dead. Long live Blue Sky. For premise, he said Afraid, which is the AI movie, right? Don't know anything about it. It's What's Inside. That's one I've been meaning to get to. Slipped through the cracks for me. Between the Temples. I hear good things about it, but Evan here is saying that he liked the premise more than he likes the execution. Atlas, never heard of. Players, never heard of. And Evan's actually the one who sparked my memory with the International Space Station movie, ISS. It was a great call, Evan. Thank you. Because that came out almost a year ago, so I'd almost completely forgot about it. As far as performance, he says Aubrey Plaza, Megalopolis, Jake Johnson, and Self-Reliance. Never heard of it. Jake Gyllenhaal. Actually, I have heard of Self-Reliance. I take that back. Jake Gyllenhaal in Roadhouse. I fucking hated Roadhouse. Matt Damon, Casey Affleck in the Instigators. Cillian Murphy in Small Things Like These. Shout out to Jason and Evan. They're on the same page there. As far as movies go, he would recommend something worth your watch would be Woman of the Hour, Mother's Instinct, Cuckoo, Trap, Magpie, and Hitman. Brian Scuttle from Sonic Cinema. Premise, Fall Guy. Wish it had focused more on the romantic dynamic than the action mystery. I kind of agree with that. Megalopolis. Interesting ideas, but execution. Woof. Performances. Aubrey Plaza, Megalopolis. Kingsley Benadir in Bob Marley, One Love. A movie I completely forgot about. For movies they recommends, even though they're just okay, Twisters, Monkey Man. That's 2 for Monkey Man. Carry On. He got some scuttlebutts. Brian Scuttle got some scuttlebutt for recommending Carry On. I don't have Netflix, so I'm never going to watch it. The Beekeeper and Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, which I may or may not have on either my best of or worst of list. You have to find out. I'm doing the worst of over at We Watch the Thing. That should be coming out soon. And then I'm recording sometime in February for best of for the countdown post regular season. So they're one of their first drops. It's going to happen after the main series has ended. Is going to be me talking about the best of movies of the year. And I'm going to take it at least 3 hours because now that Paul and Wayne have retired, there's no excuse for their episodes to be so short. If you're just going to be coming out periodically, let's get 3, 4, 5, 6 hour episodes. Let's go. Come on. I'm going to make it happen. So if you want to find out what I think is the best and the worst, or if you go find me there on those episodes and support those shows. If you want to disagree with me, you can, as the kids used to say 15 years ago in the comments down below. Make sure you're on Letterboxd at Binge Movies, and Blue Sky, which I think it's just at Binge Movies because I don't really completely know how Blue Sky works. We're on Instagram at Binge Movies Lives. I'm more active on Instagram than I am Blue Sky, but the hope is to change that in the year to come. There are very large changes coming in 2025. I'm telling you now so that you don't feel shocked when they happen. I'm very excited for the next year. Slashers 2 is in the works, kind of, and hopefully it'll be coming to you sooner rather than later in 2025. I thank you for all your support this year. This is the 3rd most listened to season in the history of the show. That's pretty remarkable. Last year was our most listened to, so that means we were on the decline. But the end of the year really picked up. And so this is our 3rd best year. And I'm still proud of that because it's not by a slim margin. So we still very much grew. The growth was a difference of between, I think we grew about 25% last year, and we grew by about 10% this year, if the numbers are semi-correct. So I thank everybody who has come on board. These episodes have been dumping out onto YouTube. And if that's where you primarily watch us or listen to us, so thank you. We've had some videos that did very well. We did the Andy Sedaris retrospective throughout the summer. We did it in 2 parts, myself and Molly. We actually got to interview Andy Sedaris's wife and creative partner, Arlene Sedaris, which is very exciting. So we have an interview with her up there that did very well. There's a re-release of Andy Sedaris' biography that's going to come out, and we are going to be a part of that. Our interview is going to be a part of that book. And some of the stuff that we covered there is going to be in the new edition of that book. That's really fucking cool. I'm so grateful for that. If you go on Instagram, you can see where actually Arlene very generously had a hard ticket to Hawaii puzzle sent to me, which is really cool. If you haven't seen Hard Ticket to Hawaii, you are in for something. I was a little worried opening it up because I didn't know what it was, and I was like, I knew it was obviously related to Malibu Bay Productions, but I didn't know what it was. So I'm like, okay, if I open this up and it's just big-breasted women topless, like, can I put this on Instagram? So I went to Patreon first, and for some behind-the-scenes content, but I come to find out there is nudity, but it's just on the side of the box, which I don't think is on Instagram, if I remember correctly. So I don't think it's in the video. Exciting things to come for 2025. I am so grateful for all of the support. I'm profoundly looking forward to ending the best of the 2000s. What a miserable decade of movies. And I will be back with 2008 very soon. The next regular episode you will hear from me will be the last movie standing for season 8.4, the last of the year. It's going to be Paul versus Megan in New Year's Nightmare. And there's some exciting movies that are going to be covered there. Let me give you the rundown real quick. I should have planned for this in advance, but I didn't. So instead, you have to hear me vamp for time. Okay, so Megan is going to be coming in and is going to have my short list, and Paul is going to have the guest list, and they are identical lists. This happens every now and again. So Paul and I covered the Final Destination series. We both selected Final Destination 2. Brett and Drew, Brett from Somewhere and Someplace, and Drew from Somewhere Else, they picked, we did creature features. And all of us picked Tremors. Megan from Spoiler Piece and Joe from Real Spoilers. Spoilers. We all three picked Blowout. Kevin from Real Spoilers and Claire from W Rated. No double entendre there. Ratatouille across the board, all three of us. And then Robert Yanez Jr. from Crooked Table Productions and 10 different podcasts. We both picked Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. So it's either going to be Final Destination 2, Tremors, Blowout, Ratatouille, or Phoenix. What movie do you think deserves to be preserved for all time, even beyond the end times? And who is going to have the best argument? Will it be Megan Kearns from Spoiler Piece Theater and part of the Slashers? Or will it be Paul, the psycho killer from The Countdown, semi-retired, very handsome man, tasked with being a matchmaker? Paul, where are my matches? Where are the beautiful Australian women that you're supposed to be sending my way? I will become a natural citizen. I will matriculate. I will immigrate. I will go to Oz, even as your ecology collapses, because that's how much I'm a believer in love. And this episode was dedicated to all of my listeners, because that's how much I believe in the power of movies and the power of your support. Is there any greater love than this? A podcast listener and their host. Till next time, binge on.